So we've mentioned the verses in Yeshayahu a couple of times, and one of the most beautiful Zmirot for Shabbat, literally singing, but the rabbis tell us that Zmirot also comes from the word zemer, which is a verb for pruning trees. So it means that with the power of our words on Shabbat, we are able to um, distort the enemy's plans for us with the power of those words. So, Ma'adit Menuchatech literally means it is so beautiful and pleasant to have the rest on Shabbat. And so the first one is introduction. It's we're going to wear special clothing as we talked about. We're going to light the candles. We're going to stop, cease from any creative labor. And then the second stanza talks about what kind of food we prepared, fattened chickens. I guess already hundreds of years ago they knew how to fatten them, but in a kosher way, because nowadays a lot of the fattened or forced-fed chickens have blemishes by breaking of their legs and stuff like that, and that's why it has to be checked. And then the third one is about the kavod and the oneg, and so in the heat aneg, and then the second last one is chafetzecha bo asurim. So your own business is forbidden, and also to make calculations, except for cheshbonot shemitzvah. We'll get to that. Hirurim mutarim. You're allowed to think in your head, but not express it outwardly. And l'shadecha banot, it can be explicit to do matchmaking on Shabbat. Tinok Lanando Sefer, of course, a young child, to teach them how to read and write. So just make sure that you don't teach them how to write on Shabbat, but how to read, and maybe even how to speak. And then the last one is Hiluchach Benachat, which we talked about, that you should not run on Shabbat, that you should walk in a pleasant way where you're not in a hurry to anywhere, and it's good to sleep, etc., etc. So these words are all based on the halachot that we've been learning, and so yesterday we talked about actual commerce and business on Shabbat, which is forbidden, but there is a leniency if it's not explicitly a business deal. So let's try to understand what this means. One who finds themselves short of food on Shabbat for the Shabbat meals, whether on account of poor planning or the arrival of unexpected guests. So, and I don't think that they came on Shabbat, because then that would mean that they should understand that you didn't expect them. So it's not your problem that you don't have food for them, but rather, let's say they came in right before Shabbat. In Israel, most of the stores, most of the kosher stores are closed approximately 2 hours before Shabbat. So if they got there, let's say an hour before Shabbat, then you can't go and buy anything because everything's closed. Um, so in this kind of scenario, one may approach the owner of a store and ask them for food from their store, with the unspoken understanding that the customer will pay for the food after Shabbat. Payment is not mentioned explicitly; rather, the customer should request the item from the owner in the same way that he would borrow the food from a neighbor. He should not use the words buy, sell, or pay. He may assure the store owner that later, whether Motzei Shabbat or afterwards, they will discuss what was taken and settle up. Even though the store owner understands from this assurance that the customer intends to pay them, as long as payment has not been explicitly mentioned, but only hinted to or hinted at, sorry, this is not forbidden. And when we were kids, we were told that we are allowed to play Monopoly on Shabbat, but we're not allowed to use the word dollar. So we called it Donald Duck. I'm not sure if that's the best way, but the idea is that even in pretend, even in a game, your conversation on Shabbat should be different from the way it is during the week. And back to the store, in this scenario, the store owner and customer should both be careful not to mention the price of a product, nor should they measure it or weigh it out as one would do during the week to determine its price. So with certain produce, we sell by weight, not by item. Actually, here in North America, there's so many things that in Israel are sold by the kilo, by weight, and not by individual. But we buy avocados per unit, and artichokes and pomegranates and lemons. Um, I think that's enough examples. Celery, we pay for a head of celery or a head of lettuce. We don't pay by the weight of it. And so, in most stores. So that is something that has changed from the time of the Talmud. But we're allowed to, after Shabbat, let's say that we did buy a head of lettuce, we're allowed to, after Shabbat, estimate approximately how much it weighed and come to an agreement with the store owner. The store owner, if they are Shomer Shabbat, because obviously their store is closed on Shabbat, will understand that even if they got a lower price than they would have if it was properly weighed, they will know that Hashem will provide for them because they were doing a mitzvah, helping another Jew have their Shabbat meal in the proper way. However, they may fill up a container, not a measuring cup, and agree that the container will be measured on Sunday with the understanding that the price will be determined based on the amount it holds. One may use a measuring cup to transport food, but not to measure out the exact amount to be poured into the customer's container, because then it is clear that the intention is to measure. For example, one may ask a store owner for 5 oranges or 5 bottles, because that is the normal way to describe the required quantity. This terminology is not used exclusively for a sale. If this customer has received items from the store owner in the past, the owner may not refer to the accumulating tab nor calculate its update amount. So again, sometimes you sell oranges by weight, sometimes by unit, and so that is something that also has to be discussed, but not on Shabbat. If the store owner does not trust the customer to remember to pay them after Shabbat, he may ask him to leave an article of clothing or an object as collateral, but he should not refer to it as collateral or security deposit or the like, because those are terms that are specifically for business. One who takes food from a store on Shabbat should not carry it out in a large box, as one would normally do during the week, box or shopping cart or basket, so that witnesses do not think that he is actually transporting the food for commercial purposes. Rather, he should hold the items in his hands or place them on his shoulders as one would normally do when bringing food to a meal. Even if this means he will have to make multiple trips in order to bring all the necessary food, this extra walking is preferable to giving the appearance of doing business. However, if one's guests are waiting for the meal, then he should hurry and bring all the food at once, even if it means carrying the food as he would during the week. But I think that a more practical suggestion is to ask your kids or the guest kids to help you carry it, and then each one has this little bag, and then that way it doesn't look like you're shopping in the regular manner. Additionally, if he's walking in a place where there is no chance that anyone will suspect him of doing business, he may carry the food in a normal way in order to minimize the walking. This is Yesh Omrim in the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. If a store or hotel owner would like to make food available on Shabbat for their customers, before Shabbat they may sell different colored cards or tickets that entitle their bearers to various items. For example, a yellow card presented to a waiter will entitle the guest to Friday night dinner, a green card to lunch on Shabbat day, a red card to a drink, a blue card to cake, etc. These are just practical suggestions. If there are not enough different colors for the different options, the names of the options may be written on the cards again before Shabbat. However, the prices may not be written on the cards, because this would make the cards the equivalent of monetary contracts, which may not be read on Shabbat, and that's part of this prohibition of that you're allowed to think about certain business things, but not expressly use those words, because that would be forbidden. Last but not least, maybe 50 meters approximately 150 feet from the shul that we went to in the old city of Beersheba. There was a nice coffee shop that also had Shabbat meals on Shabbat morning. Sometimes even the mayor would be going there. I don't think that I ever participated, but they would have a pre-arrangement with the owner that they're coming for chunt, and we would see them walking into the store, and we knew 100% that they weren't intending to pay on Shabbat, that it was either prepaid or the arrangement will be made later because of how many people attended. Trust and honesty is very important, and proper Jewish people, especially when they're trying to observe Shabbat, are also likely to be honest and share the right amount. And we'll stop here and open up for questions.